This is Kevin and Chris from Oh the Humanity, and you're listening to our chapter of As the Story Grows.
Welcome to the next chapter of As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. This week, we welcome Chris and Kevin from Massachusetts punk band Oh the Humanity to the podcast. Oh the Humanity will release their new self-titled LP on April 16th on Hellminded Records. Pre-orders are up now. This record is one of my favorites of 2021 so far, so make sure you check it out and enjoy the clips you hear in the show. Kevin and Chris chat about their musical history, including Kevin's transition to frontman, the long road that finally led to Oh the Humanity coming together, and how COVID delayed their upcoming release. So I hope you guys enjoy getting to know Oh the Humanity.
I am in Marlborough, Massachusetts. We're both in Massachusetts. The five of us are all scattered around the state. I grew up in Western Mass, outside of Springfield. Chris is from New Hampshire. You can probably tell.
I live in Salem, Massachusetts right now, but I grew up in southern New Hampshire. Not too far into New Hampshire. It's like maybe 15, 20 minutes from the Massachusetts border.
That's cool. What got you both into music?
Well, I started playing trumpet in 5th grade. Like a lot of kids, they pass around the piece of paper in school and say, which instrument do you want to play? I was like, the one with the least amount of buttons. So I played trumpet all through high school, and I did that in college too. I went to school for music because I couldn't think of anything else I could stand doing for 4 years after high school. So I played trumpet since 5th grade, and then I taught myself guitar. Like in high school, we had an old beat up guitar that my grandmother had bought me when I was like really little, like way before I should have owned a guitar. And then, one day I was just like, I wonder if I could play this thing. So my dad brought it to a music shop and got it set up. And intonation was terrible, but it was just like enough for me to like whack away at it and teach myself. And I wasn't good enough at guitar to do that in school, which is why I continued playing trumpet through college. Yeah, that was sort of what got me into music. And then, I played guitar in my first couple bands, not well, but serviceable, for high school bands and, for local stuff. But trumpet was my main focus for like a really long time.
Yeah. If I remember, you could shred the trumpet pretty good, couldn't you?
Yeah. I mean, when I was touring with In the Face in college, it was the old ska band I was in. I mean, we were playing all the time, to the point where school was trumpet all the time. And then, summers were touring, playing trumpet. So it was just constant.
Haven't been able to get him to break out the trumpet for this band yet, though.
No.
Probably a good thing, I guess.
When you have to do something for so long, going to school I didn't realize that I would also fall out of love with it when I was forced to do it constantly, when it became work instead of something I enjoyed doing. So yeah, I haven't played much, if at all, since then.
Yeah, for me, I started listening to music super young. I remember being really young and my dad putting on like Bruce Springsteen records and like Dire Straits records and like, all that kind of like dad rock type stuff. and we would listen to the records, and then we would also watch like the live concert videos all the time. And so from a very young age, I remember having a toy guitar and standing in front of the TV, watching them, you know, kind of rock out and sing into the microphone and trying to mimic that sort of thing. So those are some of my earliest memories of being into music. And then when I was probably like 11, like 6th grade, a kid that I was friends with came to school and he brought his guitar for whatever reason. And I remember him playing, like he played like a Nirvana song or something. And I was like, what? That's something you can do? Like, I thought that was something that only these way older people do, you know? And so I remember like really harassing my dad, like, Dad, I want a guitar. I want a guitar. I want a guitar. And that was the same year that I was kind of developing my own taste in music. Like I said, when I was growing up, I was listening to, you know, I was exposed to a lot of the kind of like old 70s and early 80s rock music that my dad would always listen to. And around that same year that I got that first guitar was when I started getting into, like, I remember I had cassettes of like Green Day and The Offspring and Rancid and like Megadeth and Metallica, and then, you know, a bunch of other 90s rock type stuff like Nirvana and pretty much anything that, you know, a kid with a parted down the middle bowl cut and, you know, long jean shorts down past the knees would have been listening to in the mid 90s, you know?
Oh yeah.
And so
I relate.
Yeah, so I was, I think a lot of people from our age group would relate. Not that I'm assuming I know how old you are or anything, but I was a kid in the 90s. And and so I started playing guitar right around that same time. So I just remember trying to learn all these Green Day songs and, you know, doing all right at it, and then trying to learn like Megadeth songs and being terrible at it. So yeah, it just kind of went from there to the point that, a few of the other kids at my school were too. And we got our first band together when we were like 13, maybe. It was me and 2 other kids, Jimmy and Joey. And those guys are actually still a couple of my best friends now. And we were actually working on a song via like throughout this whole like COVID quarantine thing, like sending stuff back and forth, and, you know, one guy would mix it all up. But yeah, for me, it's always been this kind of like social thing. Like pretty much not all, but a lot of my friends all just came from basically just doing that. Like, hey, I play guitar. I play drums. Oh yeah, let's go to your house and hang out and drink soda and make noise in the attic or whatever.
That's awesome. Kevin, alongside playing trumpet and guitar, at what point did you realize you could sing?
So I guess it was probably in the band I was in college. So I did backing vocals for that band. And, you know, we played a lot. So like I was in a band in high school that was just kind of like, you know, playing with friends. We'd play shows every so often, but it wasn't, you know, it was just kind of like high school stuff. And then the band I was in college, like we kind of just hit the ground running. We're just playing all the time. And, you know, like 3 years in, we got home from a long summer tour and our singer just like quit, just left. And like, it was just very abrupt and very weird, but he was gone. And, I guess this is a funny story. So we didn't really know what we were going to do. And we had a lot of like 3-part harmonies in our horn parts and in our vocals. And, you know, we didn't really know what we were going to do about the lead singer thing. And we had a show booked in Western Mass, and, you know, we'd all agreed like, okay, let's just go play it. Like, we'll figure it out. You know, our guitar player, Julius, will sing some of the songs. I'll sing some of the songs. We'll piecemeal it together for this one set, and we'll figure out a permanent solution going forward. And we got into town super early, and we went to this bar, and we were having beers. And I remember the guys bought a couple pitchers, and they handed me a beer, and they looked at me and said, "You're the singer now." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And they're like, no, yes, you are. You sing for this band now. And I was like, no, we need to talk about this. And they're like, there's no talking about it. You're going to sing for the band now. And so we were playing in East Hampton, which for me growing up was like where we always went to shows, and like at the Flywheel. It was like this little co-op kind of venue where you could like volunteer. And if you volunteered, they'd let you book one show a month kind of thing. And it was like a room that held like 60 people, but it was awesome because like all your high school friends would come, and it would feel like, packed out and crazy. And so like all my friends from high school were going to be there, and I was like terrified. I was like absolutely terrified, which is why they had bought the pitchers of beer. They're like, here you go, this will solve the problem. And it did. It was a ton of fun. And so I sang for that band for the next year and a half or 2 years of its existence. So that's kind of what I was forced into it, is the short answer to the long answer I just gave.
You're always trying to get somewhere that you're not. You're always walking, talking, driving about the next big thing, about the next informed people that you've got to see. Do you ever feel like you're always trying to get somewhere?
That's cool. And that you said that band was In the Face.
Yeah. We played a lot in a short amount of time. We were a very busy band. More so before that singer I mentioned left than after, because he was kind of like the driving force of like, there's always that person who pushes the momentum forward in a project. He was that for that group. So like, we kept playing and we did some cool stuff after he left, but it certainly was not the well-oiled machine it was from a booking perspective, after he left.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we were busy boys there for a while.
Awesome. Yeah, I found some tunes on YouTube. So
I'll send you one with my vocals recorded. Those are a little harder to find if you're curious.
For sure. Awesome. How'd Oh the Humanity start?
So for me, the music thing was always like probably more like, so Kevin, I feel like when he was growing up and playing in bands and stuff, was probably the one that was more of a active in the scene kind of musician. Kevin, you used to like book shows and things like that, right?
Yeah, like I would book shows at like Moose Lodges and stuff, and like I was putting on shows since I was like 16 or 17.
Yeah, so I always liked to play shows and everything, but for a long time when I was growing up, our bands were just kind of like we would play, we would write songs, we would hang out, and but we didn't get that many shows, basically. So a lot of times it was more of like sort of like a personal thing you did with your friends and everything, which was the cool thing about joining a band with Kevin. But ultimately, I had been playing in bands, in and out of bands with a couple of the other guys that are in Oh the Humanity, our bass player, Andy, and our other guitar player, Jim. Those guys are both from Haverhill, and the town that I grew up in New Hampshire was only like 15 minutes away from there. So I kind of became friends with them for, I don't know. We just had this whole group of people that all played music and played in different bands and everything. And so I ended up playing in a couple of bands with them a few years before we got Oh the Humanity together. But they were kind of like a little more aggressive than what we do now. Like it was more like metal or hardcore, and there were more like kind of breakdowns, that sort of stuff. But our other guitar player, Jim, had started coming up with some of the songs that would become like the first Oh the Humanity songs when we were still kind of doing those more aggressive bands. And it was sort of like, instead of having like these kind of screamy vocals, we should find someone who can like really sing well, and we won't do breakdowns or anything. We'll just do these melodic parts instead. And I was like, oh, that's really cool, but I still want to keep doing these kinds of bands. So we just never really did much with those songs. And then eventually those bands went away for one reason or another. But me and Jim, the other guitar player, like I said, we're really good friends. So we were hanging out all the time anyways. So I would go over to his house. We would just kind of like hang out, listen to records. We played a lot of chess. We played a lot of Street Fighter. So we were basically hanging out all the time, and we would play guitar. That's just one of the things we've always done together. Not necessarily with like, the intention of writing a song or the intention of starting a band, but we just played a lot of guitar together. And he would play all these different riffs, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I think this could work in the same band if we ever got anything together with that other song, with those other songs I was showing you, back a year or two ago." And yeah, eventually we just had like 4 or 5 of these songs, and I started coming up with stuff in that style too. And we were like, "Oh man, we should totally get a band. Neither of us are really active in bands right now." And we played with a few different people. We were playing with this one drummer for a while who was sort of into it, not super into it. We were playing with a couple different bass players. Eventually we started playing with Andy, who's our current bass player and who was another guitar player in one of those older bands that I mentioned. And we're like, all right, well, who are our other members going to be? And Andy's brother was in that band In the Face with Kevin. So he played saxophone. So we all kind of knew each other. Like Kevin and Andy's brother, Kevin, went to UMass Lowell. And so there was a whole group of people that we were friends with from UMass Lowell. And UMass was a big music school, right, Kevin? Like a bunch of you guys all went there for different instruments and music business and, production and recording and all this stuff.
Yep.
So we kind of had this almost like collective of people who would play in each other's bands. Like our other guitar player, Jim, filled in on a tour with In the Face, right? And,
yeah, it was very incestuous there at the end.
Yeah, and like Tim, the drummer from In the Face, played in one of me, Jim, and Andy's hardcore bands for a while. So we had this big whole sort of collective of musicians that would play in each other's bands and hang out at each other's shows, and we would go to parties at each other's house. And we had been looking for people to join this band for a little while. And eventually I was like, oh, Kevin and Teeny, who was also in the Face at one point, I was like, those guys aren't in bands anymore. And I had kept seeing them at shows and everything. And I had mentioned that we were trying to put together this sort of like kind of fast punk, but melodic. We wanted singing and stuff. I mentioned that to Kevin at another show that we were both at. And Kevin was like, oh yeah, it sounds awesome. I haven't done a band for a little while and I'd love to do it again. I was like, all right, cool. I can't wait to hear from you. And, some time went by and I never heard from Kevin. Finally, I emailed him. I'm like, hey man, did you still want to do that? And he was like, yeah, I was waiting for you to call me. I was like, oh, I was waiting for you to call me. But it was one of those things where we were both at a show, we passed each other. We used to work together. So we were kind of catching up on a few things. I mentioned it offhand. And, yeah. And so we were both kind of like, yeah, that would be awesome if we did a band. But then we just didn't for like another 6 months. And then finally we started really like kind of like it had probably been a year or two since the last time I'd really been in a band. I had played some shows with my friends' bands and things like that. But we were starting to really jones to like, have a legitimate band that we could write songs in and, full lineup, play shows, go out for weekends, record, do the whole thing. And finally, I just kind of reached out to Kevin, reached out to our drummer, whose name is also Chris. We call him Teeny. And I was like, do you guys want to do this? And they're like, oh yeah, definitely. So we just sent them some sort of bedroom demos Jim had made, and they showed up. This was in like December of 2011. And they both like practiced really hard before. We thought they were just coming to jam, but they both listened to these demos and really kind of drilled them. And yeah, they showed up and all of a sudden we had songs, and within like 2 months we were playing shows. What was our first show was there were like I said, there was this whole kind of collective of people who all were friends and played in each other's bands. A bunch of people that we knew lived in this one house on West Bauer Street in Lowell, Massachusetts. And there was a show happening at kind of like a dive college town bar called
Furies.
Yeah. And it was the theme of the show was all the bands that are going to play. There's going to be like 6 or 7 bands. All the bands that are going to play have someone who lives at this house in it. And our drummer lived in that house at the time. And so we ended up playing, and our first show was like packed. You know, you couldn't move in the room because all these bands were pretty well established. And we were like, oh, this isn't how the first show is supposed to go. I think we're getting a little spoiled here. But we had a good time, and it went over well. And yeah, we just started playing like around Lowell and Boston and, you know, all these other Massachusetts towns, like every weekend or a couple times a month or whatever for that first year.
That's cool. Yeah, you guys did a few releases with local Massachusetts label Ocelot. Was there a point where you were like, all right, we want to do this more. We want to take this to a bigger audience or nationally or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Steve helped us. Steve is the guy who runs Ocelot Records. He kind of helped us get our stuff together with like putting out a vinyl release because we'd never done that before. And he had helped a couple other, you know, Boston area bands. And I think he put out a release for a New Hampshire band too. So he kind of helped like organize us that way with like, you know, the financial aspect of getting, you know, records printed, like what to prioritize, how, like where you can cut corners, like not with quality, but like where you can save money. Cause like it's not cheap to put out vinyl, especially when you're doing it all yourself, you know? So like he helped us organize that process a ton. Like when we were the Tired Ears EP, when we were getting ready to release that, we were literally like at his apartment, like all in an assembly line, like piecing everything together, like putting it all together ourselves to like, you know, cut corners and save money. So he helped us a ton in that way. And like, he's always just been like a good friend of the band and good dude. But I think with this record, his interest in running a label was starting to wane. And, you know, we were really proud. You know, we've been proud of everything we put out, but this full length, I think we all kind of felt like, you know, I think we could probably, you know, shop this around to some, you know, big labels, but, you know, shop it around. I think we can get some interest. Like, I think someone want to help us put this thing out. And so, you know, we tracked this thing for over a year. My wife was pregnant when we started tracking, and we had a kid the middle of tracking. So that changed my timeline a little bit. That pushed back my vocals quite a bit. But so our last session was what, Chris? It was like the first week of February in 2020, or like the first or second week of February.
Yeah,
it was like right up against COVID, I think.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was like just before COVID started. But yeah, it was like, as far as like, do we want to push it further? I feel like everything we did, we've always kind of, our goalpost kept moving a little bit further ever since we first started the band. I mean, I remember when we were first getting together, it was like, oh, some of our friends are going down to New York on the weekends and playing gigs. Oh, that'd be awesome if we got a band together and we could do that. And then you do that, and then it's like, oh, I think we should be able to put together and record like a legit full length. And then you do that, and like, oh, we should start doing some tours and playing some festivals. And we started doing that. So it's like pretty much every time we look up, like the goalpost has shifted a little bit further. But yeah, with this release, I don't think it was quite. It was like right around a full year of tracking it.
Yeah, and then
we went in and, cause we didn't have it completely written. Like, I know we were still working out some lead lines and we were still working out some vocals and things like that, but it had been a little while since we'd recorded anything, and we really wanted to start recording again.
Yeah, and then like we finished that last session, and then we were mixing, and then COVID happened. And then we're like, okay, well, what are we going to do with this thing? Because, you know, what we've normally done is, you know, we put out a record and then we play as many shows as we possibly can. Like that's just how we've always done it. So like, how are we going to do this? And, you know, we got to talking with Joseph at Hellminded, and, you know, he helped us kind of visualize like what this could look like in COVID times, you know, without shows. And it's been super cool to partner with him. You know, it's been a long time coming. Like, you know, we're at a year since tracking was over, you know, more than that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it feels good to finally put it out. And honestly, it's kind of been nice to have something to look forward to, you know, because we're just at home and not playing out, and, you know, we can't get together and work on stuff because we're being safe. So, you know, now that we're finally able to put out some tunes, it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Before we dive into the record, how'd you come up with the name Oh the Humanity?
I think that was you, Chris, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't really know where I got it from, honestly.
We were asking each other this the other night. We're like, how? I think it may have been you. I'm not sure who brought it up, but it was all kind of like sure. Like, I don't think anyone was like, it was one of those things where anyone was like avid about it. It was just like, we had a show coming up. We were starting to be a band and we needed a name. And it may have been Chris who came up with it. I'm not sure, but
I'm pretty sure it was me. I think I was just kind of looking for something that kind of like, I don't even know really. I think I just wanted something that would sort of like catch the eye a little bit. But I don't know. I was just kind of, and I was also kind of like imagining the, you know, yeah, I honestly really can't elaborate anymore. I don't really remember, but it was definitely a situation where like I said, when we were first starting out, like Kevin and Teeny joined the band, and Kevin, coming from a band that was super active, was like, all right, we're going to start doing shows and we're going to start doing stuff. And we were all kind of like, had been sort of, you know, dragging our asses a little bit until that point. And we were like, okay, cool, we're going to start doing stuff. And then we got on this first show and it was like, all right, we need a name. And I was like, how about I just threw it out there at practice one day, and everyone was cool with it.
So it is finally being released April 16th. You talked about Hellminded helping you out as you prepared to release this in COVID times. You've been sitting on this record for a year. What's the plan, like promotion? Obviously you're here podcasting and trying to do interviews, I'm sure, but what's the plan for this release and promotion and music videos or anything, like trying to...
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we're trying to spread the word as much as we can. We are having a music video made. Chris's friend, Justin, is animating a video for us. It's almost done, which I'm super excited about. Cause, you know, like I said earlier, we're trying to be really safe. So we're all not getting together. So no, like, you know, live performance video. We actually had a video shoot lined up for March of 2020.
Oh, man.
And it was going to be like, you know, a bunch of people packed into a room, you know, lots of fast shots and stuff for the first single that we have out now. Which we might reserve the right to do that again once we can all get together. But yeah, so that got canceled. That was like one of the first things I think we really had canceled on us. The guy who was going to shoot it was like, you know, guys, like this is sounding pretty serious. Like, I don't think we should do this. And yeah, I think that was like the first, because we had a bunch of shows booked, we had a bunch of stuff planned, and I think that was the first thing to fall. But
yeah, I feel like that was, we had a room booked, we had friends coming, we were gonna buy lighting, we had this whole thing planned out, and it was scheduled for like March 20th or something. And it was only scheduled for March 20th because no one could do the other date, which was sometime in February. I was thinking back, I was like, oh man, if we'd only gotten it in, we would have been sitting on this kind of like cool video for the past year.
That's wild.
But yeah, so I remember I was the one that was texting, that was emailing the venue, and I was just like, yeah, I don't think we're gonna do it. maybe we can do it next month. Little did we know.
Whoops.
Little did we know. Like, remember that? Like, everything that you were doing, you're like, oh, I guess we got to push this back a few weeks.
Yeah, everything. We'll just wait till the summer to tour. School will be back up in 2 weeks.
But yeah, so we really did want to do a video for the release, and we do still want to do that video concept that we have with our other friend Dan, but we were just kind of bouncing around ideas of what we could do without really getting together. A couple of people, their living situations, they're living with people that are a little more high risk than maybe some of the rest of us are. So we've been extremely careful about not really, we're following all the rules basically.
Yeah.
We were just kind of brainstorming about what we could do. And my friend Justin works in like video production, and he does animation and stuff. And I kind of floated it to him about potentially filming something if we came up with a concept that we could do without really getting together in close quarters. And he was like, why don't I just animate you something? And I was like, yeah, can you? He was like, sure. You have a song? And so we sent him the song, and we kind of chatted a little bit, and Kevin had sort of like an idea about like some imagery that was running through his mind when he would listen to that song or think about that song. And he was like, all right, I'll take that and just run with it. So yeah, it's supposed to be done probably like this week, and hopefully we'll be able to get it out into the world sometime in April, I think.
Cool. That's cool. Kevin, is there a lyrical theme or themes running through this record?
I think less so than other things we've put out. I tend to be pretty introspective. I analyze myself a lot, and that's kind of like the core of my lyrics, the through line anyway. And this record was a little different. I mean, I think when I was diving into kind of that same place that I usually go to when I'm writing, I was finding that not to be overly dramatic, but like that person that I was writing about before, I'm not really him anymore. I've changed a lot, grown a lot, life's changed a lot. And so I think my perspective on this album was a little different. I was a little less hard on myself. I think I'm just a kind of a happier person, so, not that some of the lyrics aren't a bummer, because that's a lot of mine are. But a lot of them are a little easier on myself, I think. It was interesting. So like I kind of wrote the lyrics for this album in chunks, and one chunk was after my daughter was born, and like the lyrical content didn't change, but my access to time changed, which like forced me to work in a different way, which was cool. And then towards the end, when we were trying to wrap up tracking, I had brought a couple of things to the studio that I wasn't super thrilled with, and Chris actually offered to lend a hand. And so this was the first time on a record that Chris and I worked together on lyrics, which was really fun too. I'd always kind of taken that on myself as like, this is my task and I have to complete it on my own. But it was cool to work with another person on lyrics. I think we'll probably do some more of that in the future too.
That's cool. And musically, it seems like this record's a little more melodic, a little more, doesn't have the same hard edge as some of the earlier stuff that I listened to. Is that intentional, or just kind of the nature of writing and maturity and trying new things?
Yeah. I mean, I won't speak for Chris, but I think record to me it's representative of all five of us, like equally contributing, where, like on the first full length, it was like one person brought these songs and another person brought these songs, and maybe we collaborated on a couple of them, because it's, your first record, right? So it's all your material that you have and you put it on your first record. I think now that we've put out a few things and we kind of have a stronger identity as a band, you know, our sound, I think this is kind of what we become, you know? So like, I think this record, as you listen to it, you know, all the songs don't sound the same. You know, some are slower, some are faster, some are harder, whatever, some are softer. But I think as you listen through, it kind of represents all of us equally, kind of, which I really like about it. I mean, Chris does more of the writing of the instrumental stuff, so I'll let him, you know, say his piece.
Well, also, some of it was just me and Jim maybe trying to keep ourselves interested, you know, experimenting a little different with the a little more with some of the guitar parts than maybe we had in the past. And yeah, I don't know, nothing was really intentional, but if it just came out kind of like the way it came out. I mean, we wrote those songs over the course of maybe like a 2-year period. So maybe even some of the earlier ones are even a little different than some of the later ones. Not that anyone besides us would know which ones are the earlier ones and which ones are the later ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we definitely try to keep it interesting for ourselves. At least from the like kind of musical arrangement side of it. I mean, a lot of the times with the guitar parts and stuff, like I said, when me and Jim were coming up with the first songs for this, we were just kind of hanging out at his house, playing chess, listening to records, playing video games, coming up with some riffs. We still do that a lot of times. Like if I come up with a riff, I'll go to Jim's house and we'll just sit there and kind of like, we'll just sit there for like 2 or 3 hours and work on kind of like the same 1 or 2 parts until we have a thing that is sort of, I don't know, interesting, maybe something that we think is interesting. And then when we bring it to the band, we try and play it louder and faster.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our theme song was written and composed by the legendary Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe on iTunes and give the show a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, click on the Patreon link at asthestorygrows.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never felt so young and alive as when I'm diving into a tune.